In the quiet suburb of Willow Creek, Virginia, where manicured lawns and white picket fences painted a picture of American perfection, Eleanor Grayson's modest ranch-style home stood as a relic of a bygone era. The paint on the shutters had begun to peel, and the flower beds, once vibrant with roses, now sagged under the weight of neglect. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of lavender and antiseptic, a reminder of Eleanor's battle with lupus, which had ravaged her body, but not her spirit. At 62, her frail frame and sallow skin belied the fire that still burned in her hazel eyes. It was a crisp October evening in 2025, and Eleanor sat in her favorite armchair, a faded green relic from her late husband's era. The living room, adorned with framed photos of happier times, felt like a museum of her sacrifices. She had raised her only son Nathan in this house, pouring every ounce of her love and meager savings into his dreams. Now, those dreams were about to culminate in a wedding she wasn't sure she'd be allowed to attend. The doorbell chimed, a sharp intrusion into the silence. Eleanor adjusted her shawl, her hands trembling slightly from fatigue, and opened the door. There stood Nathan, 34, with his polished shoes and tailored blazer, his dark hair slicked back in a way that screamed ambition. Beside him was Cassandra, his fiancée, her blonde curls cascading over a designer coat, her lips pursed in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mom," Nathan began, his voice clipped. "We need to talk." Eleanor's heart sank. She had sensed this moment coming like a storm cloud creeping over the horizon. She gestured for them to enter, her movements slow but deliberate. They sat on the couch, Nathan's posture rigid, Cassandra's manicured, nails tapping impatiently on her phone. "We're finalizing the wedding plans," Nathan said, avoiding her gaze. "It's going to be at the Crestwood estate, big event, lots of important people." Eleanor nodded, her fingers tightening around the armrest. "I'm so proud of you, Nathan. I always knew you'd do great things." Cassandra let out a small, dismissive laugh, her eyes flicking over Eleanor's worn cardigan and the oxygen tank discreetly tucked beside her chair. "Yeah, well, that's what we wanted to discuss. The wedding's aesthetic is specific, elegant, modern. We've hired a planner to ensure everything's perfect." Eleanor's smile faltered. "I understand. I'll do my best to fit in. Maybe a new dress." "No, Mom," Nathan interrupted, his tone sharp. "It's not about a dress, it's you. Your condition, the tank, the way you look. It's going to make people uncomfortable. The guests, their investors, colleagues, Cassandra's family. We can't have—" He trailed off, searching for words that wouldn't sound as cruel as they felt. Cassandra filled the silence. "It's about the vibe, Eleanor. You get it, right? We've got photographers, influencers. We can't have anything distracting." The words hit Eleanor like a physical blow. She felt the air leave her lungs, not from her illness, but from the betrayal slicing through her. Her son, the boy she'd worked double shifts at the diner to put through college, the boy she'd comforted through heartbreak and celebrated through triumphs, was ashamed of her. "You don't want me there," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. Nathan shifted uncomfortably. "It's not that we don't want you. It's just better this way. We'll send you photos, videos. You'll see it all." "And after the wedding," Cassandra added, her voice saccharine, "we've been thinking. Maybe a nice facility would be better for you. Somewhere with full-time care. We've found a place in Richmond. It's top-notch." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. A facility. A polite way of saying they wanted her out of sight, out of their perfect lives. She wanted to scream, to remind Nathan of the nights she'd stayed up sewing his Halloween costumes, the years she'd gone without to pay for his private school. But the words caught in her throat, trapped by a lifetime of swallowing her pain. "See," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'll think about it." Nathan stood, relief washing over his face. "Good. We'll check in after the honeymoon." "Take care, Mom." Cassandra offered a perfunctory hug, her perfume overwhelming. As they left, Eleanor watched them climb into Nathan's sleek BMW, their laughter echoing faintly as they drove away. She closed the door, the click of the lock sounding final, like the end of a chapter she hadn't been ready to finish. Alone. In the dim light of her living room, Eleanor sank back into her chair. The weight of their words pressed against her, but beneath the hurt, something else stirred, a resolve she hadn't felt in years. She reached for the photo on the side table, a faded snapshot of her and Nathan at his high school graduation. His smile was wide, hers weary but proud. She traced his face with a trembling finger, then set the frame down. "They don't know," she whispered to the empty room. "They don't know what I've built." Eleanor Grayson was not what she seemed. To the world, she was a retired waitress, a widow living on a modest pension in a modest house. But beneath the surface of her unassuming life lay a secret she'd guarded for decades. In the 1980s, when Nathan was still in diapers, Eleanor had inherited a small sum from her father, a frugal man who'd owned a few acres of land in rural Virginia. Instead of spending it, she'd invested every penny, first in real estate, then in stocks, guided by a quiet but brilliant financial advisor named Margaret Holt. Over the years, those investments had grown into a fortune, $12 million to be exact. Rental properties in Alexandria, a diversified stock portfolio, and a few well-timed tech investments had transformed Eleanor's modest inheritance into a legacy. She'd never told Nathan, not out of distrust but because she wanted him to forge his own path. She'd planned to surprise him with it after the wedding, a gift to secure his future with Cassandra. But now, that dream lay in ashes. The morning. After Nathan's visit, Eleanor sat at her kitchen table, a cup of chamomile tea cooling beside her. She opened her laptop, a gift from Margaret, and logged into her investment accounts. The numbers stared back at her, a testament to her discipline and sacrifice. She could have lived in a mansion, traveled the world, but she'd chosen simplicity, pouring her wealth into Nathan's education and her quiet life. And for what? To be discarded like an embarrassment? She closed the laptop and picked up her phone, dialing Margaret's number. Margaret, now in her 70s but sharp as ever, answered on the second ring. "Eleanor, you sound off," Margaret said, her voice warm but tinged with concern. "What's happened?" Eleanor recounted the previous night's conversation, her voice steady but laced with pain. Margaret listened in silence, her occasional sighs the only indication of her growing anger. "They want to put me in a home," Eleanor finished. "They think I'm a burden. Nathan, he's not the boy I raised." Margaret was quiet for a moment, then said, "You've given him everything, Eleanor, and this is how he repays you? What do you want to do?" Eleanor's gaze drifted to the photo on the table. "I want to change the will, all of it, not a cent for Nathan or Cassandra. I want it to go somewhere it'll matter." Margaret didn't hesitate. "I'll call my lawyer friend, Tom Reynolds. He's discreet, and he'll make sure it's ironclad. But are you sure? This is a big step." "I've never been more sure," Eleanor said, her voice firm. "They need to learn what it means to lose something they never appreciated." Over the next week, Eleanor and Tom worked in secret. They met at Margaret's office in downtown Alexandria, a small but elegant space filled with books and the faint scent of lavender candles. Tom, a wiry man with a kind smile, drafted a new will that left Eleanor's entire fortune to the Willow Creek Women's Shelter, a local organization that supported women escaping abusive situations. Eleanor had volunteered there in her healthier years, and she knew the money would transform lives. She also wrote a letter to Nathan, her handwriting steady despite the ache in her joints. The words were simple but cutting, each one chosen with care. "Dear Nathan, you were my world, but you've chosen a path that excludes me. I've spent my life building something for you, but your actions have shown me you value appearances over love. My fortune will go to those who need it, who will cherish it for what it can do, not what it can buy. I hope one day you understand the weight of your choices. Mom." She sealed the letter and handed it to Tom. "Give this to him after the wedding," she said. "I want him to feel it when it's too late." Tom nodded, his expression somber. "You're a stronger woman than most, Eleanor," she smiled faintly. "I've had to be." The Crestwood estate was a vision of opulence, its sprawling lawns and marble columns bathed in the golden light of a November afternoon. Nathan and Cassandra's wedding was the event of the season, with 300 guests, local business, tycoons, social media influencers, and Cassandra's wealthy relatives, mingling under chandeliers and sipping champagne. The air buzzed with laughter and the clink of glasses, a perfect tableau of success. Eleanor arrived quietly, her presence unannounced. She wore a simple navy dress, her oxygen tank discreetly tucked into a small bag slung over her shoulder. Nathan had relented at the last minute, sending her an invitation after Margaret's subtle pressure, but the gesture felt hollow. She knew she was there to be seen, not welcomed. She took a seat at the back, her eyes scanning the crowd. Nathan stood at the altar, resplendent in a tuxedo, his smile practiced but genuine. Cassandra glided down the aisle, her gown a cascade of white silk, her face radiant with triumph. Eleanor felt a pang of pride, quickly smothered by the memory of their cruelty. The ceremony passed in a blur, the vows and applause fading into the background as Eleanor's thoughts drifted to her letter, now in Tom's possession. She imagined Nathan's face when he read it, the moment his world would shift. After the ceremony, as guests mingled on the lawn, Tom approached Nathan and Cassandra. Eleanor watched from a distance, her heart steady but heavy. Tom handed Nathan an envelope, his expression neutral. Nathan frowned, tearing it open, his eyes scanning the letter. Cassandra leaned over his shoulder, her smile fading as she read. "What is this?" Nathan demanded, his voice rising. Heads turned, the festive mood faltering. "This can't be real, she can't do this." Cassandra's face twisted in fury. "She's bluffing. She's got nothing, she's just a sick old woman." Tom's voice was calm but firm. "It's legal, Nathan. The will is airtight. The money's gone to the Willow Creek Women's Shelter. Every cent." Nathan's face crumpled, his hands shaking as he clutched the letter. The guests whispered, their curiosity a growing hum. Cassandra grabbed Nathan's arm, her nails digging into his sleeve. "Fix this, Nathan. She can't humiliate us like this." Eleanor turned away, her steps slow but sure as she left the estate. She didn't need to see the rest. She'd done what she came to do. Eleanor moved to a small cottage in coastal Maine, a place she'd always dreamed of visiting. With the small portion of her savings she'd kept for herself, she furnished it simply, filling the rooms with books and soft blankets. The ocean's rhythm soothed her, a balm for the wounds Nathan had left. News of her donation spread, first in Willow Creek, then beyond. The women's shelter named a new wing after her, a place where women found safety and hope. Strangers sent her letters, thanking her for her generosity, calling her an inspiration. Eleanor read them quietly, her heart full, but not healed. Nathan tried to contact her once, a rambling voicemail filled with apologies and excuses. She listened, then deleted it. He'd made his choice, and she'd made hers. On a quiet evening as the sun dipped below the horizon, Eleanor sat on her porch, a cup of tea in her hands. The air was cool, the stars beginning to emerge. She thought of Nathan, somewhere out there, grappling with the emptiness he'd created. And she thought of the women her money would help, the lives it would change. For the first time in years, Eleanor felt free. The days following Nathan and Cassandra's visit were a blur of quiet determination for Eleanor Grayson. Her small home in Willow Creek, Virginia, once a sanctuary of memories, now felt like a battlefield where her heart waged war against betrayal. The sting of her son's words lingered, but so did the spark of defiance they had ignited. Eleanor had spent decades suppressing her own needs for Nathan's sake, but no longer. She was done being invisible. Each morning, she rose before dawn, her lupus making every movement a negotiation with pain. She'd brew chamomile tea, sit at her kitchen table, and stare at the financial statements on her laptop. The numbers, $12 million, meticulously grown over decades, were more than digits. They were her legacy, her proof of resilience. She'd started with her father's modest inheritance, a few $1,000s from a patch of farmland sold in the '80s. With Margaret Holt's guidance, She'd turned it into a fortune through savvy real estate deals in Alexandria's booming market and tech stock investments during the dot-com era. She'd never touched the money, living frugally, to ensure Nathan's future. Now that future belonged to someone else. Margaret Holt's office became Eleanor's war room. Tucked in a quiet corner of Old Town Alexandria, the office was a haven of oak bookshelves and soft lighting, a stark contrast to the sterile world Nathan and Cassandra inhabited. Margaret, with her silver hair and piercing blue eyes, was more than a financial advisor. She was Eleanor's confidant, the sister she'd never had. Over cups of coffee, they plotted. "You're sure about this?" Margaret asked one afternoon, her pen poised over a notepad. "Once the will changes, there's no going back. Nathan could contest it." Eleanor's lips tightened. "Let him try. He's made his choice. I want the money to do good, Margaret. The Willow Creek Women's Shelter. They need it. I've seen the women there, broken but fighting. They deserve it more than he does." Margaret nodded, her expression a mix of admiration and sorrow. "Tom's already drafting the paperwork. He'll need a few days to ensure it's bulletproof. But we need to think about timing." "When do you want Nathan to know?" Eleanor hesitated. She'd imagined confronting him herself, watching his face crumple as he realized what he'd lost. But that felt too petty, too vengeful. She wanted justice, not revenge. "After the wedding," she said finally. "Let him have his day. Let him think he's won. Then he'll see." Margaret leaned back, studying her friend. "You're stronger than you give yourself credit for, Elle. Most people would have broken by now." Eleanor's gaze drifted to a photo on Margaret's desk, young Eleanor and Nathan at a county fair, cotton candy in hand, both laughing. "I broke a long time ago," she said softly. "This is just me putting the pieces back together." That evening, Eleanor began writing her letter to Nathan. The act was cathartic, each word a release of the pain she'd carried. She wrote, in her bedroom, the glow of a single lamp casting shadows on the walls. The letter was short but precise, its tone not angry but resolute. She sealed it in an envelope and handed it to Tom Reynolds the next day, her hand steady despite the ache in her joints. Tom, a wiry man in his 50s with a knack for cutting through legal jargon, reviewed the will with meticulous care. "It's ironclad," he assured her. "The shelter gets everything, properties, stocks, the whole lot. Nathan won't have a leg to stand on unless he can prove coercion, which he can't. You're in your right mind, Eleanor, and I'll testify to that." Eleanor managed a small smile. "Thank you, Tom. I just want it done quietly. No fuss." "No fuss," he promised, slipping the documents into a leather briefcase. "I'll deliver the letter myself after the wedding. You sure you want to be there when it happens?" "I need to see it," she said. "Not for him. For me." As the wedding approached, Eleanor found herself haunted by memories of Nathan's childhood. She'd walk past his old bedroom, now a guest room, and see him as a boy, gap-toothed, eager, clinging to her hand. She remembered the nights she'd worked late at the diner, her feet aching, to pay for his soccer camp. The time she'd sold her mother's heirloom necklace to cover his college application fees. Every sacrifice had been a brick in the foundation of his future, and now he'd torn it down with a single conversation. But there were other memories, too, ones that reminded her of her own strength. In her early 20s, when Nathan's father, Paul, had left them for a new life in California, Eleanor had rebuilt her world from scratch. She'd learned to navigate the world of investments, taught herself to budget, and found solace in the women's shelter, where she'd volunteered on weekends. Those women, with their bruised faces and unbroken spirits, had taught her that survival was a choice. She'd chosen it then, and she was choosing it now. One afternoon, while sorting through old papers in her attic, Eleanor found a letter from Paul, written years after he'd left. It was an apology, half-hearted and laced with excuses, but it had meant something to her at the time. She'd kept it, hoping one day to show Nathan that even broken things could be mended. Now she tore it to pieces, letting the fragments fall like snow. Nathan wasn't Paul, but he'd inherited his father's knack for abandonment. Her resolve hardened, but so did her isolation. Willow Creek was a small town, and word of Nathan's wedding spread like wildfire. Neighbors stopped by with well-meaning casseroles, their pity thinly veiled. "You must be so excited," they'd say, unaware of the truth. Eleanor smiled and nodded, her silence a shield. She didn't need their sympathy. She needed their ignorance. One visitor, however, saw through her facade. Lila Carter, a former volunteer at the women's shelter, stopped by with a bouquet of daisies. Lila was in her 40s, with warm brown skin and a laugh that could light up a room. She'd been one of the shelter's success stories, escaping an abusive marriage and rebuilding her life as a social worker. "You're not okay," Lila said bluntly, setting the flowers on the kitchen counter. "Don't lie to me, Eleanor." "I know that look." Eleanor sighed, gesturing for Lila to sit. Over tea, she poured out the story: Nathan's rejection, Cassandra's cruelty, the will. Lila listened, her eyes narrowing with each detail. "They don't deserve you," Lila said when Eleanor finished. "But you're doing the right thing. That money, it'll change lives at the shelter. You're giving those women a chance Nathan threw away." Eleanor's throat tightened. "I just wish it didn't hurt so much." Lila reached across the table, squeezing her hand. "It hurts because you love him. But love doesn't mean letting him walk over you. You're showing him what strength looks like." Lila's words stayed with Eleanor, a lifeline in the storm of her emotions. She began visiting the shelter again, not as a volunteer, but as an observer, watching the women who reminded her of her younger self. One, a young mother named Sarah, had arrived with a toddler and a black eye. Eleanor watched her laugh with her son, her resilience a mirror of Eleanor's own. It solidified her decision. The money belonged to them, not Nathan. Cherie, wedding was 2 days away, and Eleanor prepared with the precision of a general. She chose a navy dress from a thrift store, its simplicity a quiet rebellion against Cassandra's obsession with appearances. Her oxygen tank, a constant companion, was tucked into a discreet bag Margaret had found online. She practiced her breathing exercises, determined to stay composed during the event. Margaret insisted on driving her to the Crestwood estate, a sprawling venue an hour outside Willow Creek. "You don't have to do this alone," she said, her voice firm. "I'll be there in the background. Moral support." Eleanor nodded, grateful but resolute. "I need to face them myself. But knowing you're there, it helps." The night before the wedding, Eleanor couldn't sleep. She sat on her porch, the autumn air cool against her skin. The stars were bright, a reminder of the vastness beyond her pain. She thought of her letter, now in Tom's hands, and imagined Nathan's reaction. Would he cry? Rage? Beg for forgiveness? She didn't. No, and for the first time she realized she didn't care. This wasn't about him anymore. It was about her. She closed her eyes, picturing the shelter's new wing, the women it would house, the futures it would build. She saw Sarah's son growing up safe, loved, free from fear. And she saw herself, not as a victim, but as a woman who'd chosen her own ending. The Crestwood estate glittered under a November sun, its marble columns and manicured gardens a testament to wealth and ambition. Eleanor arrived early, slipping in through a side entrance to avoid the throng of guests. Margaret followed, her presence a quiet anchor. Eleanor took a seat at the back, her oxygen tank hidden beneath her shawl. She felt like a ghost, unseen, but watching. The ceremony was a spectacle, every detail curated for Instagram perfection. Cassandra's gown sparkled, Nathan's smile was camera-ready, and the guests, dressed in designer suits and dresses, whispered about stocks and startups. Eleanor's eyes lingered on Nathan, searching for a trace of the boy she'd raised. She found none. As the vows echoed, Eleanor's thoughts drifted to her plan. Tom was waiting in the wings, the envelope ready. She'd instructed him to deliver it during the reception, when Nathan and Cassandra were at their peak of triumph. The timing was deliberate, a final act of control in a life where she'd had so little. The ceremony ended, and the guests spilled onto the lawn for cocktails and canapés. Eleanor stayed seated, her hands folded in her lap. A few guests glanced her way, their expressions a mix of curiosity and pity. She ignored them, her focus on the moment to come. Tom approached Nathan and Cassandra near the dessert table, where they posed for photos. Eleanor watched from a distance, her heart pounding but steady. Tom handed Nathan the envelope, his voice low but clear. "From your mother," he said. Nathan's smile faltered as he tore it open. Cassandra leaned in, her expression shifting from curiosity to shock. The letter fell from Nathan's hands, fluttering to the grass. His face drained of color, and he grabbed Tom's arm. "This is a mistake. She can't do this." Cassandra's voice was a hiss. "She's nothing. She doesn't have that kind of money." Tom's reply was calm. "She does, and it's gone. The will is legal. The Willow Creek Women's Shelter is the beneficiary." The guests nearby fell silent, their murmurs replaced by a tense hush. Nathan's knees buckled, and he sank into a chair, the letter crumpled in his fist. Cassandra's face twisted, her composure shattered. "You idiot!" she snapped at Nathan. "You said she was broke." Eleanor stood, her movements slow but deliberate. She didn't need to hear more. She walked past the stunned guests, past Nathan's crumpled form, and out into the fading light. Margaret followed, her hand resting lightly on Eleanor's arm. "You did it," Margaret whispered. Eleanor nodded, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "It's done." The drive back to Willow Creek was quiet, the hum of Margaret's car the only sound. Eleanor stared out the window, the weight of the day settling into her bones. She'd expected to feel triumph, but instead, there was only a hollow peace. She'd reclaimed her power, but at the cost of her son. Margaret broke the silence. "You, okay?" Eleanor took a deep breath, the oxygen tank hissing softly. "I will be. It's strange, though. I thought I'd feel more." "You gave him a chance," Margaret said. "He made his choice. Now you get to make yours." Eleanor nodded, her thoughts drifting to Maine, to the cottage she'd chosen. She'd leave Willow Creek in a week, after tying up loose ends. The shelter's director had already called, overwhelmed with gratitude. The donation would fund a new wing, counseling programs, job training. It was more than Eleanor had ever dreamed of achieving. Back home, she packed slowly, each item a piece of her past. Nathan's old soccer trophy, her wedding photo with Paul, the quilt her mother had made. She kept only what mattered, donating the rest to the shelter. The house would go on the market, its proceeds added to her donation. A week later, she boarded a train to Maine, her oxygen tank at her side. The journey was long, the scenery a blur of autumn reds and golds. She felt lighter with each mile, as if she were shedding the weight of Nathan's betrayal. In Maine, her cottage was everything she'd hoped, small, cozy, with a view of the ocean. She spent her days reading, walking the shore when her strength allowed, and writing letters to the shelter's director, offering advice on how to use the funds. The women there called her their guardian angel, a title she accepted with a quiet smile. Nathan's voicemail came a month later, a rambling plea for forgiveness. "I didn't know, Mom. I didn't mean it. Please, let's talk." She listened, her heart aching, but deleted it without responding. Some bridges, once burned, couldn't be rebuilt. On a crisp December evening, Eleanor sat on her porch, a blanket draped over her shoulders. The stars were brighter here, the air cleaner. She thought of the shelter, of Sarah and her son, of the countless women her money would help, and she thought of Nathan, somewhere in his perfect world, grappling with the void he'd created. She sipped her tea, the warmth spreading through her. For the first time in years, Eleanor Grayson was free, not just from Nathan, but from the weight of a life defined by others. She'd written her own ending, and it was enough. Eleanor Grayson's cottage in Rockport, Maine, was a world away from Willow Creek's manicured suburbs. Nestled on a bluff overlooking the Atlantic, the small clapboard house was weathered but sturdy, its white paint chipped by years of salt. and wind. Inside, Eleanor had made it her own. A second-hand bookshelf lined with novels, a quilt draped over a wicker chair, and a small table where she sipped chamomile tea each morning. The ocean's rhythmic crash was her new companion, drowning out the echoes of Nathan's betrayal. It was December 2025, and winter had settled over the coast, wrapping the town in a quiet chill. Eleanor, now 62, moved slowly, her lupus, a constant shadow. The oxygen tank hissed softly at her side, but she'd learned to tune it out, like background music. Each day she walked the rocky shore when her strength allowed, her scarf fluttering in the wind. The cold air stung her lungs, but it also reminded her she was alive, free in a way she hadn't been in years. Her new life was simple but deliberate. She'd kept enough money, about $200,000 from her savings, to live comfortably but modestly. The rest, her $12 million fortune, was now in the hands of the Willow Creek Women's Shelter, a decision that brought her peace even on the hardest days. She'd left Virginia behind, selling her old house and donating most of its contents. The few possessions she'd brought to Maine fit in 2 suitcases: clothes, a photo album, and her mother's silver locket, a reminder of the woman who'd taught her resilience. Rockport was a small town, its residents a mix of fishermen, artists, and retirees. Eleanor kept to herself, but her quiet dignity drew curious glances at the local market or coffee shop. She'd smile politely, deflecting questions about her past. To them, she was just Ellie, the newcomer with kind eyes and a slight limp, but to herself, she was a woman reborn, her scars a map of survival. One morning, as she sat on her porch watching the sunrise paint the sky pink, a letter arrived from the shelter's director, Karen Delgado. Eleanor opened it carefully, her hands steady despite the cold. "Dear Eleanor, your gift has changed everything. We've broken ground on the new wing, named the Eleanor Grayson Haven, and it's already a beacon of hope. Women are finding safety here, and your name is spoken with gratitude every day. Sarah, the young mother you met, asked me to thank you. Her son, Liam, started preschool last week, and she's training to become a nurse. You've given them a future. Please visit if you're ever back in Virginia. You're family to us." With deepest thanks, Karen Eleanor folded the letter, her eyes stinging. She thought of Sarah, her fierce determination, and Liam's shy smile. The shelter had been her lifeline during her volunteering days, a place where she'd found purpose when Nathan was young and Paul was gone. Now, it was her legacy, a testament to the strength she'd reclaimed. She tucked the letter into a drawer and stepped outside, the ocean air sharp against her skin. For the first time, she felt not just peace, but pride. She'd done something bigger than herself, something Nathan could never take away. Back in Willow Creek, the Eleanor Grayson Haven was taking shape. The new wing, funded by Eleanor's donation, was a modern marvel. A 2-story building with private rooms, a daycare, a job training center, and a counseling suite. Karen Delgado, a tireless advocate with a knack for turning chaos into order, oversaw every detail. The shelter's capacity had doubled, and its programs were drawing attention from donors across Virginia. Sarah Martinez, the young mother Eleanor had met, was one of the shelter's brightest stars. At 25, she'd escaped an abusive boyfriend, arriving with nothing but her 3-year-old son Liam and a duffel bag. Eleanor's donation had funded Sarah's first safe night, and now, months later, she was thriving. She'd enrolled in a nursing program at the local community college, her tuition covered by the shelter's new scholarship fund. Liam, a bundle of energy with his mother's dark eyes, spent his days in the daycare, drawing pictures of boats and stars. One evening, Karen gathered the residents for a small ceremony to dedicate the new wing. The room was packed with women, their children, and a handful of local reporters. Sarah stood at the podium, her voice steady but emotional. "I was lost when I came here," she said, clutching a crumpled tissue. "I thought I'd never get out, that Liam and I would always be running. But this place, this haven, gave us a home. And Eleanor Grayson, wherever you are, you gave us a chance. Thank you." The crowd applauded. some wiping tears. Karen stepped forward, holding a plaque engraved with Eleanor's name. Eleanor's gift wasn't just money, she said. It was a message. You are enough. You are worthy. This wing is her legacy, and will carry it forward. The story spread, first in local papers, then online. A Washington Post feature titled "The Widow's Gift" detailed Eleanor's donation, painting her as a quiet hero. The article didn't mention Nathan or the wedding, but it didn't need to. The contrast was clear. A woman who'd been discarded had chosen to lift others up. In Alexandria, Nathan Grayson's world was unraveling. The Crestwood estate wedding, meant to be his triumph, had become his undoing. The memory of Tom Reynolds handing him the letter haunted him. His mother's words, sharp and final, burned into his mind. He'd lost everything. The fortune he hadn't known existed, his mother's love, and increasingly, Cassandra. Cassandra had been livid after the wedding, her dreams of a lavish future shattered. The $12 million she'd assumed would fund their penthouse, vacations, and status was gone, redirected to a cause she couldn't comprehend. She'd screamed at Nathan in their hotel suite, her words venomous. "You said she was nothing. You said she had nothing. How could you not know?" Nathan had no answers. He'd spent his life believing Eleanor was just a struggling widow, scraping by on a waitress's pension. The revelation of her wealth was a gut punch, but her decision to give it away was worse. It wasn't just the money. It was the realization that he'd misjudged her, underestimated her, and now she was gone. He tried to salvage things. He called Eleanor's old number, leaving voicemails that ranged from apologetic to desperate. "Mom, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. Please, let's talk. I'll make this right." But the calls went unanswered. The number eventually disconnected. He drove to her Willow Creek house, only to find it sold, a young family already moving in. The neighbors, once friendly, avoided his gaze. Cassandra's patience wore thin. Her social media, once filled with wedding photos and curated perfection, now hinted at cracks, cryptic posts about trust and disappointment. By January, she'd moved out of their shared apartment, taking half the furniture and leaving a note. "You're not who I thought you were." Nathan didn't fight it. He was too busy fighting himself. He started drinking, a habit he'd once kept in check. At his marketing firm, where he'd climbed the ranks with charm and ambition, his performance slipped. Clients noticed his distraction, his red-rimmed eyes. His boss, a no-nonsense woman named Diane, called him into her office. "You're losing it, Nathan," she said, her tone blunt. "I don't know what's going on, but you need to get it together or you're out." Nathan nodded, his throat tight. He couldn't tell her the truth, that he'd lost his mother's fortune, her love, and his own self-respect. He left the office and drove to a bar, the neon lights blurring through his tears. In Rockport, Eleanor's routine was interrupted one snowy afternoon by a knock at her door. She opened it to find a young woman, mid-20s, with wind-blown hair, and a hesitant smile. "Hi, I'm Mia," she said, holding a basket of muffins. "I live down the road. Thought I'd welcome you to the neighborhood." Eleanor blinked, surprised. She'd kept her distance from locals, wary of questions, but Mia's warmth was disarming. "Thank you," Eleanor said, stepping aside. "Would you like some tea?" Over chamomile and blueberry muffins, Mia shared her story. She was an artist, painting seascapes for tourists, and had moved to Rockport to escape a toxic relationship. "I saw you walking the shore," she said. "You looked strong but sad. I figured you might need a friend." Eleanor smiled, her guard lowering. "I'm not used to company anymore, but this is nice." Mia became a regular visitor, her laughter filling the cottage. She reminded Eleanor of Sarah with her quiet resilience and fierce independence. One evening, as they watched the sunset, Mia asked about Eleanor's past. Hesitant at first, Eleanor shared pieces of her story, Nathan's betrayal, the shelter, her new start. Mia listened, her eyes wide. "You gave away millions?" she said, awestruck. "That's incredible. Most people would have kept it." Eleanor shrugged. "It wasn't about the money. It was about doing what's right. Mia's paintings began featuring a figure on the shore, a woman with a shawl and a quiet strength. When Eleanor saw one, she recognized herself. "You make me look braver than I feel," she said. "You are brave," Mia replied. "You just don't see it yet." By spring 2026, the Eleanor Grayson Haven was a beacon of hope in Willow Creek. Sarah graduated from her nursing program, landing a job at a local hospital. Liam, now 4, drew a picture of Eleanor, a stick figure with a halo, and mailed it to her. Eleanor pinned it to her fridge, a reminder of why she'd made her choice. Karen Delgado sent regular updates, each one a small victory. The shelter had hired more counselors, expanded its daycare, and started a mentorship program for young women. A national charity network took notice, offering to partner with the shelter to replicate its model elsewhere. Eleanor's name was becoming a symbol, not just in Willow Creek but across the country. Meanwhile, Nathan's life continued to spiral. He lost his job after missing a major deadline, his drinking now a daily escape. Cassandra, now engaged to a wealthy real estate developer, erased Nathan from her social media as if he'd never existed. He moved into a cramped apartment, his savings dwindling. The Washington Post article about Eleanor's donation haunted him, its comments section filled with praise for her and veiled criticism of the ungrateful son. The article didn't. Dame. One night, drunk and desperate, Nathan wrote a letter to Eleanor, pouring out his regret. "I was wrong, Mom. I didn't see you. I didn't know. Please give me a chance to make it right." He mailed it to the shelter, the only address he could find. Karen, recognizing Nathan's name, forwarded it to Eleanor unopened. Eleanor received it on a rainy April morning. She stared at the envelope, her son's handwriting a ghost from her past. She didn't open it. Instead, she placed it in a drawer, beside Karen's letters and Liam's drawing. She wasn't ready to forgive, and maybe she never would be. Nathan's pain was his to carry, just as hers had been. Summer arrived in Rockport, the air warm and thick with the scent of wildflowers. Eleanor's health was declining. She tired more easily, her walks shorter, but her spirit was steady. Mia's friendship had become a lifeline, their conversations a mix of laughter and quiet truths. Eleanor began writing again, not letters but a journal, chronicling her journey from Willow Creek to Maine. She wrote about the shelter, Nathan, and the woman she'd become. One evening as they sat on the porch, Mia handed Eleanor a small painting. A woman on a cliff facing the sea, her shawl catching the wind. "It's you," Mia said. "Not just who you are, but who you've always been." Eleanor's eyes welled up. She hung the painting above her fireplace, a reminder of her strength. She didn't know how many years she had left. Lupus was unpredictable, but she knew they'd be hers, lived on her terms. In Willow Creek, the shelter thrived, its impact growing. Sarah, now a nurse, mentored new residents, sharing her story to inspire them. Karen planned a national conference, inviting Eleanor to speak. Eleanor declined, preferring her quiet life, but sent a letter to be read aloud. "Keep fighting. Keep loving. You are enough." Nathan, meanwhile, hit rock bottom. A DUI landed him in jail for a night, a wake-up call that forced him to face his choices. He enrolled in a recovery program, taking a job as a barista to pay the bills. He thought of his mother daily, her letter etched in his memory. He didn't know if she'd ever forgive him, but he vowed to try, one day at a time. Eleanor sat on her porch, the painting glowing in the firelight behind her. The ocean stretched before her, endless and unyielding. She'd lost a son, but gained a legacy. She'd been broken, but had rebuilt herself, and in the quiet of her new life, she found something she hadn't expected: joy. By the summer of 2027, Eleanor Grayson had settled into the rhythm of her life in Rockport, Maine. The coastal town, with its lobster boats bobbing in the harbor, and its salty air, had become her sanctuary. Her cottage, perched on a bluff overlooking the Atlantic, was a haven of simplicity. At 64, Eleanor's lupus had progressed, her joints stiffer and her energy more fleeting, but she refused to let it define her. Each morning she woke to the sound of waves, brewed chamomile tea, and sat on her porch to watch the sunrise. The oxygen tank, now a permanent fixture, hummed softly at her side, a reminder of her limits but also her defiance. Her days were quiet but purposeful. She read voraciously, novels, poetry, and memoirs of women who'd overcome hardship. She tended a small garden, coaxing wildflowers and herbs from the rocky soil, and she wrote, filling a leather-bound journal with reflections on her past and hopes for the future. The journal was her confidant, a place to process the ache of Nathan's betrayal and the joy of her new life. She wrote about the Willow Creek, women's shelter, her pride in its growth and the women whose lives it had changed. She wrote about Mia, the young artist who'd become her friend, and the painting above her fireplace, a woman on a cliff, facing the sea. Mia's visits were a highlight, her laughter a counterpoint to Eleanor's solitude. Over the past year, their friendship had deepened. Mia, now 27, had opened a small gallery in town, her seascapes drawing tourists and locals alike. She often brought sketches to show Eleanor, seeking her opinion with a shy smile. "You see things," Mia said once. "Not just the art, but the heart of it." Eleanor cherished these moments, but they also reminded her of what she'd lost with Nathan. She hadn't heard from him since his letter arrived in April 2026, unopened and tucked away in a drawer. She'd considered reading it, late at night when the silence felt heavy, but each time she'd stopped herself. Forgiveness was a choice, and she wasn't ready to make it. One August afternoon, as a storm rolled in from the sea, Mia arrived with a newspaper from Virginia. "You need to see this," she said, spreading it on the kitchen table. The headline read, "Eleanor Grayson Haven expands, becomes model for national shelters." The article detailed the shelter's growth, now a flagship for a network of women's shelters across the Northeast. Karen Delgado, the director, credited Eleanor's donation for sparking a movement. A photo showed the new wing, its sign gleaming. Eleanor Grayson Haven. Eleanor's throat tightened. "They're doing it," she whispered. "They're really doing it." Mia grinned. "You did that, Ellie. You changed the game." Eleanor shook her head, her eyes on the photo. "I just gave them the tools. They're the ones building something." That evening, she wrote a letter to Karen, her handwriting slower but still steady. "I'm proud of you all. Keep shining. You're my family now." She mailed it the next day, along with a small donation from her savings, a gesture to show she was still part of their fight. In Willow Creek, the Eleanor Grayson Haven had become a beacon of hope. The new wing, completed in early 2027, housed 50 women and their children, with private rooms, a library, and a community kitchen. The daycare, buzzing with laughter, gave mothers like Sarah Martinez the freedom to pursue education or work. Sarah, now a registered nurse, worked night shifts at Willow Creek General Hospital, her confidence growing with each patient she helped. Her son, Liam, now 5, was thriving in kindergarten, his drawings of boats and stars a staple on the shelter's bulletin board. Karen Delgado had big plans. With the National Charity Network's support, she was launching a training program for shelter directors, using the Eleanor Grayson Haven as a model. She'd hired Sarah as a part-time mentor, sharing her story with new residents. "You're proof it works," Karen told her. "You're what Eleanor wanted." Sarah often thought of Eleanor, the quiet woman who'd changed her life. She'd never met her, but Liam's drawing of the stick figure angel was her way of saying thank you. At a community fundraiser, Sarah spoke to a crowd of donors, her voice clear and strong. "Eleanor Grayson didn't just give us money. She gave us dignity. She showed us we're worth fighting for." The shelter's impact rippled beyond Willow Creek. A documentary filmmaker, inspired by the Washington Post article, began work on a feature about the Haven, interviewing residents and staff. Karen sent Eleanor a rough cut of the footage, along with a note. "You should see this. It's your story, too." Eleanor watched it in her cottage, tears streaming down her face as she saw Sarah, Liam, and others thriving. The film ended with a dedication for Eleanor Grayson, whose strength lit the way. In Alexandria, Nathan Grayson was clawing his way back from rock bottom. The DUI in early 2027 had been a wake-up call, forcing him to confront the mess he'd made of his life. He'd lost his job, his fiancée, and his mother's love. But the jail cell, cold and stark, had shaken him awake. He enrolled in a recovery program, attending meetings in a church basement, surrounded by strangers who became his lifeline. He took a job at a coffee shop, steaming milk and wiping counters, a far cry from his marketing executive days. Each day was a battle. He'd wake to the memory of his mother's letter, her words a knife in his chest. "You've chosen a path that excludes me." He'd underestimated her, assumed she was weak because of her illness, her simple life. The truth, that she'd built a fortune and given it away, was a mirror reflecting his own failures. Nathan started writing letters to Eleanor, not mailing them, but keeping them in a notebook. They were apologies, confessions, promises to be better. "I didn't see you, Mom. I was blind. I want to make it right, even if you never forgive me." Writing became his therapy, a way to process the guilt that gnawed at him. By late 2027, he'd been sober for 6 months. He found a new job, a low-level position at a nonprofit focused on community outreach. The pay was modest, but it gave him purpose. He began volunteering at a local shelter, not the Eleanor Grayson Haven, but a smaller one in Alexandria, serving meals and listening to the residents' stories. Their resilience reminded him of his mother, and each shift was a small act of atonement. One evening, while sorting donations, he overheard a conversation about the Eleanor Grayson Haven. A volunteer mentioned the documentary, praising the woman behind it. Nathan froze, his heart pounding. He hadn't known about the film, but the name, his mother's name, felt like a sign. He tracked down a screening at a community center and watched it alone, tears streaming down his face as he saw the lives his mother had changed. After the screening, he approached the organizer, a woman named Rachel. "That's my mother," he said, his voice breaking. "Eleanor Grayson. I hurt her. I need to find her." Rachel's eyes softened. "She's in Maine from what I hear. But she's private. You might not get the answer you want." Nathan nodded, his resolve hardening. "I have to try." In spring 2028, Nathan made the decision to find Eleanor. He'd saved enough for a bus ticket to Rockport, using his vacation days to make the trip. He didn't know if she'd see him, but he needed to try. He packed a small bag, including the notebook of letters, and boarded a Greyhound bound for Maine. The journey was long, the scenery a blur of highways and small towns. Nathan stared out the window, rehearsing what he'd say. "I'm sorry. I was wrong. I'm trying to be better." He didn't expect forgiveness, but he needed her to know he'd changed. In Rockport, he checked into a cheap motel and asked around town, describing Eleanor, a frail woman with kind eyes and an oxygen tank. A fisherman pointed him to the bluff, mentioning Ellie's cottage. Nathan's heart raced as he walked the winding path, the ocean roaring below. He knocked on the cottage door, his hands trembling. Eleanor opened it, her face pale but composed. She looked older, her hair grayer, but her eyes were sharp, assessing. "Nathan," she said, her voice neutral. "Mom," he said, his throat tight. I came to say I'm sorry. I was wrong. I didn't see you." Eleanor studied him, her expression unreadable. "Come in," she said finally, stepping aside. They sat in the small living room, the painting of the woman on the cliff above them. Nathan poured out his story, his mistakes, his recovery, his work at the shelter. He handed her the notebook, his hands shaking. "I wrote these for you. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need you to know I'm trying." Eleanor took the notebook but didn't open it. "Why now?" she asked. "Because I saw what you did," he said. "The shelter, the women, the lives you changed. I was selfish, Mom. I didn't understand what you were worth." Eleanor's eyes softened, but her voice was firm. "You hurt me, Nathan. You made me feel like nothing. I've built a life here, and I don't know if there's room for you in it." Nathan nodded, tears falling. "I know. I just needed you to hear me." They talked for an hour, the conversation stilted but honest. Eleanor didn't offer forgiveness, but she listened, and that was enough for Nathan. When he left, he felt lighter, not absolved, but hopeful. Eleanor's health declined steadily through 2028. By winter, she was largely housebound, her walks limited to the porch. Mia cared for her, bringing meals and reading aloud from Eleanor's favorite books. The shelter sent regular updates, each one a reminder of her impact. The documentary had aired on public television, earning awards and sparking donations for shelters nationwide. One snowy evening, Eleanor opened Nathan's notebook. The letters were raw, filled with regret and resolve. She read them slowly, her heart heavy but open. She didn't write back, but she kept the notebook by her bed, a bridge she might one day cross. In early 2029, Eleanor passed away quietly in her sleep. The ocean sung her lullaby. Mia found her. The journal opened to a page about the shelter. The town mourned, and the shelter held a memorial, attended by hundreds, including Sarah and Liam. Karen read Eleanor's final letter. "Keep fighting, keep loving. You are enough." Nathan attended, standing at the back, his face etched with grief. He'd continued his work at the Alexandria shelter, finding purpose in helping others. He didn't expect to inherit anything, but Karen gave him a letter from Eleanor, written in her final days. "Nathan, I see you now. Keep going." Mom, the Eleanor Grayson Haven endured, a testament to a woman who'd turned pain into purpose. Nathan carried her legacy forward, not as her heir, but as her student, learning to live with the weight of his choices and the hope of redemption. Eleanor's painting hung in Mia's gallery, a woman facing the sea, her shawl catching the wind. It was her story, her strength, her silence, and the world it had changed.